The Thanks for being here. Most of all, I want to just start off with an apology. I said it to the last group. I'm going to say it even more to you guys. I told Jennifer a couple days ago I got a 6-minute talk. Is that the right time? Fine. Last night when I timed it, it was 9.5 minutes. It was about 13 minutes in the first session. You don't want to know what it was for the second session, and I apologize in advance for this one. Problem is the more I talk to people who visit the art and who come in and we interact, I'm learning so much. I have new things to say, new things to communicate. So I'm going to try to keep this on track and get to the real show with JK. But I'd like to lay the groundwork for viewing her poetry and with the photography as an accent. Thank you. A couple of thank yous. Thanks for Lola for actually making this possible. Lola sponsors that facilitate it. To all the volunteers who created this wonderful setup, to our food, to the accoutrements, everything who helped put it up. The focus today is on myself and JK when it really should be on the people who really made this happen. This is just the sum of a lot of people working behind the scenes. Thank you, Jennifer, wherever you are. Energy, enthusiasm, support, everything we could ask for, and Nick for bringing people together. Really grateful. JK for her wonderful articulation of the Northwoods experience. I can only learn. My wife and daughters I want to thank. My wife and younger daughter unfortunately couldn't be here. My older daughter Crystal is back there filming me with a camera as I speak, and probably going to be posted on Instagram, which I'm about to speak negatively of in a moment, but we'll get there. And I really appreciate it because my family supported me after I retired from my very dry job with the federal government, and I learned the importance of personally creative activity in your life and how important that is to a meaningful and healthy and significant life, spiritually and emotionally. I want to thank our creator for making the subject that JK and I are both trying to describe the world around us. And in some ways, I just feel like the person who's documenting it. Big thanks goes to you guys because I really appreciate the fact that you're here. And here's why. Here's your poster. We've seen it all around town. Everybody's seen them. But there's a misprint on it. And the misprint is the word free. Because it doesn't cost any money to come in here. Money's easy to come by. Well, I wouldn't say that, but it's easier to come by than time. The older I get, the more I realize that. So the real currency that we have is our time. And I'm going to look at that a little bit here. And you have all taken the time and invested time in us. And I want to try to make sure that that investment is wise and worthy. So to accomplish that, I'm going to speak a little bit about myself, a little bit. I try not to, and then we'll get on to listening to JK and her poetry, and then we'll have plenty of time to walk around, and you can mine through these poems for the nuggets of wisdom and insight that are in there. And I think after hearing her read a couple of poems and some of the things that she has to say, you'll see the poetry with new eyes. I know I certainly did. And I had read them all. And after talking to her and listening to her, I go back and say, did I even read this thing 2 days ago? Because I see it differently. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful process. Extra credit, if anybody can find it, somewhere in the room, there's a picture that is mounted upside down. So in the interest of looking deeply and intentionally afterwards, see if you can find it. Kind of a fun little challenge. Nobody's found it yet. They've all come up to me and I had to show them where it is. So one of the pictures in the room is upside down. A little bit about me. A little bit. I spent slightly over half a century taking photographs, both making and taking them. Slightly different process. And I never claimed to be a fast learner because it's only been in the last couple of years that I've learned to try to identify my personal photographic style. If I was younger or taking photography at an earlier age, it's one of the things I'd like to teach the younger generation is start earlier to find what's in you, what is your photographic style. But after a lot of introspection, soul searching, looking inside and thinking, I guess the best way I can describe my photographic style, it's the answer to the 150-year-old question. And the question is, what if Emily Dickinson owned a camera? And by that I mean, what if we choose to use, Instead of using words to communicate as our vocabulary, one chose to use images for that to air their thoughts. And that being said, the second question and the first question begs a third question. What if both were used to convey emotion, intent, perception, and experience? So what we have before us is our answer, slightly hypothetical answer to that question. What happens when you use both words to create images in the mind and images to create words in the mind? And how do they fit together? And we'll see that maybe they're not as different as we think. So let's take a look at what's poetry and what's photography. Dictionary definition of poetry. Here we go. With apologies to Merriam-Webster. Writing that formulates a concentrated imaginative awareness of experience in language, chosen and arranged to create a specific emotional response through meaning, sound, and rhythm. Is that poetry? Okay, I guess it's poetry. But this is looking at a subject on a shallow level, on a descriptive level. And what I'd like to submit to the group today is to look deeper than that surface level. So let's take a look at what the poets say about poetry. W.H. Auden said, poetry is the clear expression of mixed feelings. You'll see a lot of that on the walls around me, and that it's a clear expression of mixed feelings. This is significantly different than the dictionary definition of poetry. I really like this one from an unlikely source. Poetry is the rhythmical creation of beauty in words. And that came out of Edgar Allan Poe. We normally think of a little slightly different style of poetry. Robert Frost tells us that poetry is when an emotion has found its thought and the thought has found words. So between those three poets telling us about poetry and Merriam-Webster, you can see that there's a huge difference between describing something and living an activity. Same thing applies to photography. Merriam-Webster tells us, dictionary definition of photography is, quote, the art or process of producing images by the action of radiant energy, especially light, on a sensitive surface such as film or an optical sensor. Okay, that's photography, photography, light writing. It's true, but does it capture what photography is? We've got Louis Daguerre, who invented the daguerreotype back in the nascent, very beginning of photography, the person who first figured out how to create an image using light. And did he describe it in technical terms, in f-stops and shutter speeds and depth of field and all these? No. What he said was this: I have seized the light and I have arrested its flight. And that's probably one of the best descriptions of photography I can find. I have seized the light, I have arrested its flight. It's a poetic way of saying exactly what photographers do. We say to that instant that flies by so fast, you're not going anywhere. I gotcha. I'm going to keep you. Either as an artifact to pass on to future generations, or my future self, or as a method of personally expressing myself, or both. So that's exactly what photographers do. Again, we need to look deeper to see what they do. Dorothea Lange tells us the camera is an instrument that teaches people how to see without a camera. Ansel Adams says, you don't make a photograph with just a camera. You bring to the act of photography all the pictures you have seen, all the books you have read, the music you've heard, and all the people you have loved. And that was Ansel Adams, arguably the greatest photographer the country's turned out yet. So you can see where he looks at it at a completely different level. So this is the difference between looking deeply at an activity or looking at it on a surface activity. Speaking of surface activities, let's consider our current obsession, national obsession, I'll call it, with social media. And I'm not going to try to bash social media. I'm not going to try to bash Instagram. I have an Instagram account. It's on my card back there. I'd love it if you guys follow me. We'll connect on Facebook. I get it. But we need to use social media in its proper place. A little research on Instagram tells me this. The maximum video length that you can put on Instagram is 60 seconds. Longest story you can tell, 60 seconds. The average time spent watching a video on Instagram is between 6 and 10 seconds. So that's it. So you can see how our attention is shortening. We're looking shallower. the average time spent looking at each image, if I were just to do this, everybody knows what I'm doing. I'm scrolling, right? It's become iconic in our culture. So the average time spent looking at an image on Instagram, statistics vary, but it's really close, a little over or a little under a second. The average of the averages is about a second. So that's a 1 second view. So that would be like doing something like this. Let me show you. Let's say we invited you here, and we didn't have any pictures on the walls, but I were to do this. I brought some pictures, okay? Okay, hey, thanks for coming to my Instagram photo exhibit. Glad to be here. 1,000, 2, 1,000. That one didn't get as many likes as I wanted. Better promote this one. 2, 1,000. Yeah, okay, all right. No, okay. Well, that one got a few more likes. 3, 1,000. Oh, that one got more. Okay, good. And there we go. Okay, hey, thanks for coming to my exhibition. That'd be ludicrous. What can you see? But this has become normalized. It's the normal way of looking at imagery. I'd like to submit that the normal way of looking at imagery would be to stop, to read, to look, and to see deeply. So I'd like to think of this gallery that we're in right now. I've described it. Think of it as an anti-Instagram room. And I'm trying to be, again, social media has its place. It's great for staying connected. But I'm not sure that its best purpose is in displaying photographic or poetic information. So I think of this room as an anti-Instagram chamber that invites contemplation, consideration, cogitation, of slowing down and looking deeply. And perhaps we could think of poetry and photography. I've heard it described as a click pause button on life. Where we just stop. All the chatter stops. And we could stop and contemplate. So as you look at the offerings today, the photographic ones, please keep in mind an old adage. The camera looks both ways. The images that we create are both representations of the world around us, but I believe more importantly, they're depictions of the way we see the world. These images are my way of saying, here, welcome to my world, share my world. And this was articulated a lot better by a fellow by the name of Marcel Proust in Les Prisonniers. And it's a little wordy, but I want to read it because I think this is really a good point. He says, the only true voyage, the only bath in the fountain of youth, would be not to visit strange lands, but to possess other eyes, to see the universe through the eyes of another, of 100 others, to see the 100 universes that each of them sees, that each of them is. And this we do with artists like this. We may really fly from star to star. So when we think of this, here's what we're given. We're given a choice between a dictionary-prescribed social media Instagram-ish abbreviated version of the world in front of us, or the option to look deeply at length, and to look at our world as Mr. Proust proposed, the eyes of another, of 100 others, to see the 100 universes that each of them sees. And that opens the world for us to a vast experience. So today, again, I'm honored, I'm grateful. Thanks for being here. You have no idea what it means to me. Thanks for spending your precious time currency here, and maybe take a few minutes, look around, and look a little deeper, especially after you hear what JK has to say. Welcome to our world. And now I'd like to introduce somebody who shares a big love of the Northwoods, seeing deeply and communicating clearly, JK Roche.
Thank you, Mark.
And I think I was even shorter that time.
You know, I think you were better. This is our third time through. I think that was the best presentation. Thank you so much. And everything that you said means so much to me, and it really articulates exactly how I feel as an artist. And just come over so they can see us together.
Here we are. We actually do exist. We coexist.
We just met each other.
Yep.
We've been working together since October on this exhibit, and we're hoping to do some other projects together. So I just want to thank you,
Very good.
Mark,
Thank
for
you.
that wonderful presentation.